Hello, roommate. So basically, this is just going to be a quick tutorial on how to make a simple bot. In this example, we're just going to go ahead and create a bot that basically scatters ashes. Simple, but I'm going to show you some of the basics as of how to go about making a simple bot like this. So first of all, we'll just create our package. So in this instance, I'll just call it scatter ashes, just as an example. Now I have already released a bot with this. You can see that in our in the forms. I will link it in this thread as well, so you can see that. Basically, it's just it'll be this code that I'm doing right now. But yeah, let's get started. So what we'll do is first of all, we'll create our Java class. So in this case, we'll just call it scatter. Um, so this is going to be our main class. So we're going to handle absolutely everything in here, because obviously, like I said, it's just going to be a simple bot. We don't need multiple classes. I'm going to create a enum, which is going to be the ashes. So here we're going to list like all the different types of ashes that we can scatter to gain the prayer XP. What else do we need? We need the XML file. So we'll just go to file, we'll create it, and we'll just type in ashes.xml. Fuck it. Something simple. So let's just quickly create our enum. So it's done. So we're just going to use getter. We're going to use lombok, and then we're required args constructor. Now in here, I've got Google next to me telling me obviously what ashes we can use. So let's do it in order. So let's call it findish, and the findish ashes. Oh, vile ashes. Malicious, abyssal, and then we've got infernal ashes. Let's just remove ashes. Infernal ashes. So obviously in this enum state, we've just created basically what's going to display on our user interface. We are going to be using the default user interface that RuneMate provides us. So here, so your first lot of text here. So obviously you find dish vile ashes. Let's actually just call that vile. Malicious, abyssal, and infernal. That's what's going to display on the user interface. And then obviously the item game name next to it, which we will put here. We will define here, should I say. Let's call it a string because it's obviously a string, and I'll call it item name. And then all of that should now be perfect. Right, let's go over to our ashes XML. Let's just quickly do something here. So for this, doesn't need to be anything spectacular. There will be a like template that you can use. I'm just going to basically steal one that I've already done. Here we go. Obviously, I can just type one. Let's give it a name, scatter ashes, all in one, because obviously it supports all of the ashes that we can do. So basically this is just going to be our scatter ashes, and then it needs to be to scatter because obviously that's our main class. So let's start from the top. So obviously our main class is this scatter, which is the first class that we made, which is this one. So when somebody runs the bot, it's obviously going to lead to our main class. This is the name of the bot. Obviously I'm not going to be using direct input, but obviously I'll keep it optional. But in case if you do use direct input, you would need to put it as required. But in fact, I'll just keep it as required for now. Scatter your ashes. So your tagline is obviously what displays on the bot store when somebody hovers over the bot before they download it. Then obviously description, keep it to a maximum of 110 characters. You can go ahead and edit this later on. Obviously a version of your bot. So every time you want to update it to the bot store, you would obviously update it by a decimal. And then your internal ID, basically it's self-explanatory. Just keep it something unique and how it will identify it. If you go ahead and create a bot, so for example, if I keep it as this, I publish it to the bot store, and then I go ahead and change that, I will basically duplicate that bot twice on the bot store. So you want this to be something that it will always stay the same essentially. Open source, obviously we don't, in this case, it's going to be open source anyway, because I'm providing you with the code. But if you're wanting it private, so other people can't download it from the bot store, you would obviously keep this false. And the rest is pretty much self-explanatory. There's the descriptions above, but we'll not get into it. So as for the main class, I'm also going to be using Lombok here, and I will use log4j2 for the login. Let's just give it a topic just as an example. So we're going to be scatter. In here, I will be using a config file. So let's call the config here. Might as well right now. So getter settings provider updatable equals true, and then private, and we'll just give it a name, scatter config, I guess, and then just give it a name config. So the scatter config, we actually need to make this. So interface scatter config. There we go. It's already imported. Now, before we move going forward, we need to implement obviously a looping bot or task bot, whichever you decide to go for. In this case, we are going to be using looping bot, which is standard in RuneMate. So extends looping bot and implements settings listener, because obviously we are using a config. Pardon me, sorry. So we are using a config, so we obviously need to listen out for any settings changed. So we need the settings listener. Now we notice that it's gone red. We just need to implement the methods. So it's auto-generated us on loop, on settings changed, and on settings confirmed. Let's go ahead and create a boolean started. We'll call it false, because obviously we don't want the bot to automatically start as soon as they run it. So here we would put started equals true, and then in our on loop we must, if it hasn't started, and then we return it, and then we will just put hit start to start the bot, obviously the bot. Let's give it default UI set status, and then we could just also put the same. In fact, let's actually put string message equals hit start to start the bot. We can cancel this out, and let's type message, and same again here. Boom. Rather than us repeating the same string over and over, it just makes it more sense. Right, okay, so in here we also need to make sure that the config, if config equals null, then we obviously return, because if it returns null, it means our bot's not going to work essentially, because we're using a config in this example. So in our config, real quickly, we need to add scatter config extends settings, because we're obviously using the settings. RuneMate settings, is it? Is it setting open? Yeah, that's the one. Make sure you do get it, the imports correct. Otherwise, it'll just cause issues later down the line. I think the other import that we do need is com.runemate.ui. is it annotation? We'll leave it for now when we come to it. Let's do settings, group, scatter, because obviously it's for the scatter bot. And then we can do settings, section, title. We'll give it a title, so we'll call this scatter settings, I guess. I don't know, whatever you want to call it. Description, select your settings here, and then we'll give it an order, and I'll give it 1. String, settings equals settings. Right, okay, so basically what we've done here so far is in our config, we've given it a heading. So I will show you an example, obviously, once we come to it. But this is it's going to be the border. It lays out the UI frame, essentially. And now we just need to add settings into this frame, which is obviously going to be for the guys that are going to be using the bot, and what they can see and what they can customize from. So we're going to settings. We're going to need to give it a key to give it a unique ID identification, essentially. Title, we'll just give it ashes. Section, obviously we're going to just put it into the settings that we've just created. And then obviously the order can be 1. And then default ashes, and then we'll just give it ashes. Return ashes dot, and then we'll just put fiendish. Right, so basically what we've done here is within our section, we've given it an option to display to the user. We've given it a unique ID of ashes. The title, which the user will see, is obviously ashes, so they know what they are going to be selecting for this. We've put it into the same section here, which is obviously this one. Order 1, so it's just going to be at the top of this section. We've called our class ashes, which is an enum, so it will display all of these as a list. And then we've just given it a name, ashes, all in uppercase. The default one that will display is basically the return statement here. So we link it to our ashes enum, and then obviously the first one that we've put in here is this one. So we no longer need any of these two. So that's our config and our enum done already. Now we just need to complete our main class. So let's get started with the main class. So in here, we will quickly create a onStart. So override, and we will go to, where's onStart? OnStart arguments. We can remove obviously what it defaults from. String arguments. We will need to add a dispatcher, get listeners. In fact, quick tip, I would highly recommend if you're going to ever add listeners, I would check to see if they're not already running. If they are, you don't need to obviously add another listener on top of the listeners that are running. So in this case, I'll put if get event dispatcher dot get listeners dot contains this, get event dispatcher get listeners dot no dot add listener this, and then we can put we'll just log it so we know obviously that it's gone through correctly. So when we run the bot in our terminal, we can see that it's run and now added the listeners. So added event dispatcher listeners correctly. And then outside of that method, we can, just as an example, we can add client UL, show alert level, just give it a information, and then our message. So when we start the bot up at the very top of RuneMate's user interface, we can give the user any information if as of what you want really. So you could be like, join our Discord if you run into errors, blah blah blah, etc. So let's just give it as an example. Join our Discord if you have any issues, and then you can provide them with a link. So you could just do H, and then obviously HTML code. I'll just put here, just for this example, and that's pretty much it for the on start. We don't need to add anything else onto that. So let's go into our on loop. So back into here, we now need to check, see if our local player, so obviously the RuneScape character is null or not. So are we logged in or not? So I'll call ourselves local. Actually, no, I'll call it player, just for your sake. Players.getLocal. If player equals to null, then we return, and then we can just log it again. Player is null. Returned, for example. After that, now we need to start stating our states, essentially. So what kind of state we want to be in. So let's go back up to our Boolean and we'll call state, and we'll give it a name called state. Let's now go ahead and, in fact, let's just reformat this real quick. There we go. So it's a little bit neater. In here, let's just give it an enum. So we'll call enum state, and then we will put bank, because obviously we need to bank to collect the new lot of ashes out of the bank, and then let's just put scatter, I guess, because they're the only two states that we ever need to be in. So our state, when we're in the bank state, we're obviously going to open the bank. We are then going to withdraw the ashes that we have selected through our config. And then as soon as we've finished doing that, and we've verified that we have the ashes in our bank, in our inventory, we will then move to the state scatter, which will then obviously close the bank and then start scattering for the prayer XP. And that's just going to be a loop, and it's going to be a cycle between those two up until you obviously have no more ashes in the bank to use. So let's go ahead and create our. We need to obviously create our state. So in this example, I'll just create it. I'll make it quite simple. So if state equals bank, that would be good if I called state.bank. State bank, yeah. And then I will put, we actually need to create a void. So it'll be void bank and void scatter. And then obviously bank, boom, and I can return that. And then same again for the state equals scatter dot. What is it doing? Scatter dot state dot scatter. And then we can just call scatter and then return. If you're obviously making a large bot, this is just an example. I would highly refrain from doing it this method. You would want to use advanced switches. So you would want to make like a switch statement, something like this. Just an example. But yeah, in this case, we don't need to. So let's just keep it like that for now. So let's go ahead now, and we need to actually check to see if we are in a null state. So obviously when we start the bot, we are in a null state. we have no state because we've not actually give it one, which is obviously what you would want. So if state equals null is equals to null, then we would check if inventory dot contains. So we've given it a name. We now need to check our config to see if we actually contain any of the picked ashes. So config.getItemName. If our inventory does contain these ashes, we can then basically just say state equals state.scatter return. Else, if we don't have them in our inventory, we would then call state.bank to obviously go to the bank. But that's pretty much it for that. That's the on loop there, pretty much done. So this will just constantly loop. Now in our void bank, we need to give ourselves a name. So vinyl var player players.getLocal. If player equals to null, return. And then final var inventory equals inventory.getItems. We now need to check, see if the bank is open. So if bank is open, then this is obviously where we handle our deposit, etc. Or well, should I say, withdrawing the ashes. So if actually, first of all, we will check to see if we have any of the ashes in the bank. So if bank doesn't contain config.ashes.getItemName, then we will I'll stop the bot. Stop message string message equals we ran out of config.ashes.getItemName. Stopping bot for unwanted behavior. And then we will then log.debug, show the message, default UI, set status, call the message, and then we would just call stop and then message. In fact, we don't even need to log that because the stop will do that for us. So if the user obviously opens the bank, doesn't have any of the ashes in the bank that they've selected, we've created a string which will then display on the RuneMate user interface, and it will just stop the bot, and it will also display that same message into the logs. So if you as a bot author request for the logs to be sent to you, you can then also see that same message. So you know what's happened essentially. So bank's still open. So we've checked to see if they don't have any of the ashes, but if they do, we now need to withdraw them. So if bank.contains config.ashes.getItemName, and then if bank.withdraw config.ashes.getItemName. Now, obviously, we want to withdraw 0. So in this case, 0 is defaulted to maximum. So it would be obviously 28 inventory spaces. So this would be essentially just like calling 28. Now in here, I'm going to make it not complicated, but I'm going to make sure that we withdraw the exact same amount as how many inventory spaces we have remaining. So inventory.get empty slots. So let's say if we've got a bunch of random items in our inventory and we've got 2 empty slots left, this will only withdraw the two ashes at a time. So if we've withdrawn them, we now need to execute.delay while, in fact, execution.delay until I'll do inventory.contains config. ashes.getItemName, and then give it a delay of 2000 milliseconds. And then I'll return that statement to double check to see if we actually and inventory.contains. Okay, so what I've just done here is I've just quickly added on. So basically what we're checking for, if the bank contains the ashes, but the inventory doesn't, then we will then go ahead and withdraw them. But if the bank contains them and we've already got ashes in our inventory, then we obviously won't retry to withdraw more, essentially. That's basically what that is doing there. So now we need to, in fact, let's go ahead and if bank is open, let's check to see if we actually have any random items in our inventory before we start trying to withdraw them. So if inventory.contains any except and inventory config.ashes.getItemName. What have we done here? If inventory yeah, there we go. So if our inventory contains any items except, so obviously we're going to check our inventory, see if we've got any of the ashes, see if we don't have any of the ashes. Wait, no, I've just gone blonde head. Right, so let me start again. Basically what we're doing here in this if statement is if our inventory contains any other items than the ashes that we want in this case, then we will obviously deposit them back into our bank. So if this method is returns true, if bank.deposit all except config.ashes.getItemName, and then execution.delay until inventory.contains only config.ashes.getItemName. And then obviously we will do a 4-second delay and return that statement just to confirm that that's all we've got left in our inventory. Right. Okay, so I will go back over all of this a little bit better. So in here now, we just need to in fact, that's pretty much it. So if the bank isn't open, then bank open. That's pretty much all we need to do right now. This is assuming that we are stood next to, so obviously in RuneScape, we obviously need to be stood next to a bank for this to open. If we're not, it would be highly recommended to add like a web path to a landmark. But in this instance, I'm not going to go into that. Let's just keep it quite simple for you to obviously understand. But that's pretty much it. So bank.open. Right. So in here, I'm going to do the exact same. So vinyl var player equals players.getLocal. If player equals to null, then return. And then let's call final var ashes equals get ashes. We will call a method for this in a second. In fact, actually, I could just do config.get item name, I guess. That works as well. So if ashes isn't equal to null, if inventory doesn't contains ashes, then we obviously need to go back into the state bank. and return that. Right, so if the ashes don't return null, and we don't contain any ashes anymore, we call the state bank. Else, we must start obviously interacting with them. So if ashes.interact, actually, it would be better to do it this way. So let's do get ashes, and then we will call a method called get ashes. Below here, so obviously outside of our scatter method. Then we will just call it private sprite item, because obviously we are looking for an item in our inventory, and we'll just call it get ashes. So in this case, we just need to query them. So item equals inventory dot get items, config dot ashes dot get item name dot first. Actually, I don't even need that, do I? Yeah. Return item isn't equal to null, or if item is inventory dot get selected item. That's pretty much all we need to do. What's this for? Oh yeah, we need to first. Actually, we'll do sort by indexed first. So we'll do it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 rather than just going like 1, 28, 24, 16, etc. This will go through our order, through our inventory order, correct? So let's remain get ashes. Inventory contains so I would obviously need to change this now to the ashes got item name, state bank. So now in here we just obviously interact, and it would be scatter to interact with them, execution dot delay until, and I'm just going to use an animation just to see if we are, in fact no I won't. I will check to see if the ashes is valid anymore, and I'll just call that a 1800 delay. We just need to return that. That's pretty much it. State.state.bank. Return that method. Method same name. Right. Yeah. That's fine. Scatter ashes. Let's rename or refactor. Call this scatter ashes. There we go. So we should have no error there. But that's pretty much it. That's how you would create a simple bot. So just to quickly go over all of this, we've called our config, which we made at the start of this video. We've made a boolean. A boolean can only return true or false. So in this case, we're using started to see if the bot has actually been started. A state, obviously we are using different states, so we've made an enum with our different states. We've called one bank, so whenever we're in the banking stage, obviously it's quite self-explanatory. We interact with the bank, we deposit, withdraw, anything vice versa into the bank or out of the bank. Scatter, obviously we are interacting with the ashes. So that's pretty much it.